Thank you. Thank you. The research in Guyana was related to common terns that we were banding en masse here on Cape Cod. The Massachusetts Audubon Society started receiving hundreds of band recoveries from a small country in South America. How many people find banded birds? We never do, and here we were getting lists. We learned that the people in this small country on the north coast of South America live on birds and fish. That's how they survive. They live predominantly along the coast. Everything south of the coast is northern Amazonia, and I went under the auspices of Mass Audubon to live with these trappers and learn how they catch the birds, the types of birds they catch. And so needless to say, on one given evening, my host said, "You know, man, my wife has cooked a special meal for you today." And she brought in a big bowl of common terns. So that's what that's about. That's where the piping plovers taste like chicken. I don't know if you ever saw that bumper sticker. But that came from my research because all the MBBA guys and people who resent closing the beaches to protect beach nesting birds seemed to believe that piping plovers were part of the migration to South America, but they're not. Piping plovers don't migrate past the Gulf Coast. But other plovers and sandpipers are caught en masse in these South American countries, and that's what my hosts were catching and living on. So piping plovers I don't know what they taste like because I never ate them. Tonight we're going to talk about resolving some misconceptions about a wild canid that is in all of our neighborhoods, and that of course is the Eastern Coyote. It was about 1989 when I was at the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History that the dog officer from Harwich brought in to my office a lactating female. I had never seen a coyote on the Cape. I had never heard that they were part of our ecosystem. It was about that time that the fire chief in Eastham, a fella called Jack Austin, took a photograph of one in his backyard. This is about 1989, which is a good time ago. And on that, I started studying and trying to learn about Eastern coyotes as much as I could. And I've been doing that now for about 30 years, almost as a citizen scientist, but as a field naturalist and biologist. I've worked with Trent University in Canada doing genetic profiles, which I'll show you tonight. But you're going to, I think, learn about some things tonight that may surprise you about this wild canid. So I'm going to go through a number of slides. I'm not one of those double carousel guys. I have about 30 pictures. I would encourage any questions that you may have, any discussion, because I'm sure that there will be some, because you're going to find out things about these animals that you may not have thought was necessarily the case. So Eastern coyotes are a hybrid of Western coyote and Eastern wolf. They're found everywhere in Eastern North America now, from Florida to Nova Scotia. They're found in all of the towns on Cape Cod. They breed here, they raise young here. We see them in our neighborhoods, we see them walking down the street. We see them everywhere. And they're a wild dog. They are a dog. They are as dog can be. Males are larger than females. They breed in January. Like all canids, it's a 63-day gestation period. So pups are born in April. So pups are in the dens now, nursing, probably will emerge any day. This is a pair that I knew quite well in Brewster, near my house. I saw them as often as I wanted to. They were always in the bog hunting mice. If you're ever in a situation where you want a better look at a coyote, you see a coyote in your yard and you want to get your camera, or you see a coyote in your yard and you want a better look at it, you just simply put your fingers to your mouth and squeak. The coyote will stop and stare. And most of the photographs that I've made here are all in a situation where I had the coyotes coming to me so that I could photograph them. And this pair, as I said, was a beautiful pair, male and female, that I knew quite well. So we think of coyotes as the western coyote, the road runner on a cliff with an anvil, and wily coyote. And they are smaller in western North America. They're considerably smaller. The California coyotes, New Mexico coyotes are nowhere near the size of the coyotes, eastern coyotes that we have here on Cape Cod and throughout eastern United States and eastern North America. For the last 100 to 120 years, coyotes increased their range eastward. They're very successful. They took the space, they moved eastward, they moved into upstate New York and northern New England in the 1950s. First one in Massachusetts was recorded in 1958, out near the Berkshires. There are some interviews and some accounts of them bringing, of recruits bringing them on the train to the base out here, the Air Force Base out in Sandwich and that area. But I don't know if that's true, but I spoke to people when I was doing my research early on that told me that. They said, oh, the guys, the recruits used to bring them in on the trains as mascots, and that's how they came to Cape Cod. But I don't really know if I buy that. Maybe true, there may have been a few puppies around in the 30s and 40s, but to my knowledge, they really didn't occur on the Cape in numbers, that is, coming over the bridge on a regular basis until the late 80s. And they became very well established after that. There's always concerns about livestock. One of the main concerns about livestock has to do with sheep and horses. A woman called me up on the telephone when we used to have telephones instead of cell phones, and she said, there are coyotes harassing my horses every night. And I said, I don't know why they would be harassing your horses. She said, well, they're in the barn, and my horses are pounding away, and I go out there with my .22 or my pitchfork, and the coyotes run away. And I say, well, is there ever any damage to your horses? And she said, no, I think the horses scare them away. So I did some investigation for several nights, and this is what I found. The coyotes were going into the horse barn, jumping up onto the bucket of sweet oats and chowing down on the sweet oats that she was feeding her horses. It had nothing to do with the horses, except that the horses were nervous that the coyotes had their feet over their food troughs and were eating the oats. So there is always concern about coyotes and livestock. Now, one of the things we've learned in the last, I'd say about 10 years, is that we're finding introgression with domestic dogs. We know that eastern coyotes are a hybrid of the western coyote and the eastern wolf. Used to be called a timber wolf. Southern Ontario, Michigan, Minnesota, the southern part of Canada and the northern part of the United States. As those coyotes moved eastward, they interbred with timber wolves because all dogs can interbreed. The other two movements of coyotes, one was through the Ohio River Valley, the second one was through Texas and the southern states up through the mid-Atlantic states into the northeast. Most of the eastern coyotes we have here in New England are of the northern movement that interbred with eastern timber wolves, and for that matter, are 20 to 30% larger than western coyotes. But look at this animal. This is an eastern coyote with a white-tipped tail. I feel very strongly that this animal, which is photographed on Nauset Beach, has clear introgression with domestic dog. And there's no reason in the world why an eastern coyote wouldn't breed with a domestic dog. If a female is in heat and she's outside in January, she's going to breed with a male coyote, and the same other way around. But this certainly does not look like your average eastern coyote. And we have been finding more domestic dog in the DNA of these coyotes, these eastern coyotes. Am I going too fast? No. Let's talk about small dogs. Everybody has concerns about coyotes and their dogs, and it's legitimate. However, during the 1500s, there was a plague in Europe called the bubonic plague, caused by fleas on black rats, not Norway rats, black rats. And so, to that end, several species of domestic dog were bred small to chase rats. So all of us, I have big dogs, but everyone who has small dogs has a dog that is a chaser. Nobody here has a terrier or a beagle or a dachshund or a poodle that is not a chaser. And if you're a small chaser, like a Jack Russell or a West Highland or a dachshund, there is nothing more exciting in your life than to have your owner open the door and say, "Go and do your business," and have a coyote walking down the road. Because that small dog will be gone. And it's going to chase that coyote, Eastern Coyote, until the Eastern Coyote gets fed, turns around, grabs the dog, shakes it, drops it, and walks away. Eastern Coyotes don't eat small dogs. They can't be bothered with small dogs, except that they do not want to get bit in the back leg or the back foot, because they'll starve to death and die. So the coyote shakes the small dog, drops the small dog, walks away, and the headline reads, "Beloved pet mauled by vicious coyote." I'm not a coyote protector. I'm not a coyote sympathizer. I get my DNA samples from hunters who shoot them. I'm not here to say coyotes are so beautiful, don't hurt them. I don't mind how you feel about coyotes. I don't mind if you love them. I don't mind if you hate them. But it's time to get whatever's on your chest off your chest today. Because I've been working with these animals for over 30 years. I've weighed hundreds. I've looked at every part of a coyote's body many, many times. Sent DNA samples to Trent University in Canada, and I'm going to show you some amazing genetic results in a minute. Small dogs always chase coyotes. Big dogs chase coyotes, but play with them. There are so many accounts, including my own dog, Gus, playing with coyotes because they're dogs. They do all the things dogs do. They wiggle their butt with their feet out. They run around in circles. They roll over. They play with big dogs all the time. There are people in Wellfleet and Eastham who have sent me pictures of the coyote sitting at the end of their driveway, waiting for them to let their black lab out so they can run around the yard. If you've ever been to the Bird Watchers General Store in Orleans, you talk to Kathy Clark about her collie and the coyote. She was in her house. She heard a ruckus on the porch. She looked out the window. The coyote was down underneath her wicker couch trying to get at something. She came out. She scared it away. It came back. She went out. She looked under the couch, and there was a big rawhide bone. She took the rawhide bone. She went out with her collie and proceeded to run around the yard with her collie, an Eastern Coyote, and a rawhide bone until the coyote just got fed up and walked away. There are so many accounts of Eastern Coyotes and large dogs playing because they're dogs. That's what they do. Small dogs, keep your small dog on a leash or you're going to lose it, because it's going to chase, it's going to chase any dog. Another scenario, two people walking their dogs on a golf course, a Dalmatian and a golden retriever. Two males, they let the dog off the leash. The dogs get into a tussle or a dog fight. Owners break it up, apologize to each other, go their merry way with the dog on the leash. Somebody lets their Dalmatian off the leash on a golf course. Eastern Coyote, the dogs get into a fight. headlines. Vicious coyote attack on beloved pet at Eastward Ho. There are many, many misconceptions about eastern coyotes, and people have attitudes about them. They have feelings about them. They love them, they hate them. They're just another wild animal that lives in our neighborhoods. They're shaped like a dog, and that's what worries people, because over 1 million people a year go to the hospital with injuries from beloved domestic dogs. But the number of people that go to the hospital with injuries from eastern coyotes is, you could count it on both hands. Some people let their cats out. That's a sure way to lose your cat. Great horned owls eat skunks. Great horned owls love skunks. If you have a black and white cat and you let it out at night, chances are it will disappear. And of course, cats are not exempt. Cats kill everything that moves in front of them. I once found a fur ball in the yard from a cat with crisscross little friskies at one end and a Baltimore Oriole head at the other. So if you're letting your cat out, it's going to kill every butterfly, dragonfly, snake, grasshopper, chipmunk, mouse, and so they are not exempt. So don't let your cats outside. If you do let your cat outside, you might as well admit it's just because you don't want to clean the litter box. That's why people let their cat out, because they don't want to bend over, smell that, scrape it up, put it in a bag. Clean your cat's litter box, keep it indoors, don't let him out, because it's going to get hurt. And it's going to kill everything that moves in front of it. Our cats are always indoor cats, and we love them. They belong on your lap, purring, wagging their tail in your face and stuff like that. So eastern coyotes eat small mammals. That's what they prey on. They prey on meadow voles, white-footed mice, chipmunks, squirrels, rabbits. A lot of people think that the reason Bob Whites disappeared is because of coyotes. They say, oh, the coyotes ate him. I worked with terns for 10 years on every beach from Plymouth to Wellfleet. And I've learned that people who now study the tern nesting colonies are very quick to blame any predator that they can because they see tracks in the nesting colony. So there are lots of predators that eat terns. However, one of the most prestigious journals in the world is a journal called Nature. And in my coyote book, I wrote a book called Coyotes in the Neighborhood. It's an informational guide. I brought some with me. I cite this paper in Nature, and the title of the paper, peer-reviewed paper, is Ground Nesting Birds Benefit in the Presence of Eastern Coyotes. Studied extensively. Now think about that. The reason that ground nesting birds, from grouse to towhees, and everything in between, ducks, benefit from the presence of eastern coyotes is because the coyotes control what this author describes as the mesopredators, the middle-level predators, the egg eaters, the skunks, the possums, the foxes, the raccoons. So in the presence of eastern coyotes, these egg-eating mid-level predators are either taken out or driven off. So before you blame all the birds losing their eggs to coyotes, think about the fact that it's the egg-eating predators, especially skunks and raccoons, that are doing the damage to ground nesting birds. This is a coyote. They bound on their food rather like foxes. They locate their food visually or by ear and then pounce on it. In this case, a meadow vole in a bog. Meadow vole on the right, white-footed mouse on the left. The meadow vole on the right lives in fields. It's what we call a field mouse. The white-footed mouse, Peromyscus, on the left is the guy that lives in your stove when you're gone for the winter. They're the woodland mouse. Hi. They're the woodland mouse that comes indoors or that we see in our wood piles. They live in the forest. They live in the pine oak woodlands. Field mouse, woodland mouse. Both are prey to virtually all predators, from birds to mammals. Both of them reach sexual maturity at about 31 days. Both of them reproduce offspring about 19 to 21 days. And rabbits are very similar. And the reason is because they're prey items. Their role is to feed larger predators. Some parents at my school that I taught at, the Lighthouse Charter School, called Mr. Niles or me because they said I was putting ill thoughts into their child's head, that I was being cruel. And this is because I was explaining predator-prey interaction to my 7th graders, and they understood predator-prey interaction very well. The part that the parents didn't like was when I told the kids that when they get home from shopping at night and they pull in the driveway and they see a rabbit sitting on their lawn, that the rabbit is going, maybe tonight, fulfilling its destiny as a prey item. We often see eastern coyotes on beaches. Any of you tomorrow morning could go to your favorite beach, and along the edge of the scarp, where the dunes meet the beach, you'll find a nice straight line of eastern coyote tracks. Very shallow, as big around as a plum, small tracks. Dogs dig their feet in, show their claws, are having fun. Coyotes are walking in a straight line, very shallow imprint. They're found everywhere on all of our beaches. I feel like I'm going too fast because nobody's asking me any questions or anything.
That's fascinating. You want a question?
Yes, I want a question.
If they don't eat eggs, why are they shooting them out on Monomoy?
To protect, ostensibly, to protect the terns.
So they're really misinformed.
There are a number of people who work for the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife who are labeled as sharpshooters. They need something to do. It's conceivable that in the presence of eastern coyotes, the tern nesting colonies could desert. And that's a concern. Because South Monomoy Island is now the only breeding site in Massachusetts, except for 2 islands in Buzzards Bay, for common terns. When I was with Mass Audubon doing all of my tern research, I was at Nauset, I was at New Island, which was an island off Nauset Inlet, I was at Plymouth Beach, I was at 2 beaches in Sandwich, I was at Grays Beach in Yarmouthport, at Bass Hole, I was at West Dennis Beach. All of those places had nesting colonies of common terns. And they've all been driven out by people, dogs. Now they all of the terns in Massachusetts, except for Bird Island and Ram Island in Buzzards Bay, nest on South Monomoy. Like 20,000 pair, an incredible huge number of common terns. And as the last stronghold, the sharpshooters go out and shoot the coyotes. I put this photograph in of a least tern because I really like least terns. I used it because I wanted to explain that this is not a prey item of eastern coyote as much as great horned owls are. Great horned owls are the major predator of common terns on Cape Cod. Colonies would desert at night, completely desert, leave all of their eggs and chicks abandoned every night for the entire breeding season. The incubation period, which is 23 days, was extended to 28 days. So this is a lesson for you about birds, if I may. When you have birds that leave their eggs, you say, oh, well, I've got cardinals in my yard, but they're being scared by this or that, my dog, or whatever, and they go away, they don't incubate their eggs. The eggs don't die. The chicks don't die. The incubation period is just extended. So if it takes 14 days for bluebirds or cardinals or catbirds to hatch their eggs, but it's near your front door, in a forsythia bush, and every time you go out the front door, the bird flies off the eggs. The eggs aren't going to die. They're just not going to hatch in the 11 to 13 days. They're going to hatch in 16 to 18 days. The incubation period is just extended. And that's what happened with all of these terns that would desert at night because of great horned owls. So coyotes do kill and eat seals. But they don't. But they don't. May I comment on that? Okay, I'm just going to say something, okay? Because I'm standing here and I can't. We in the 1970s couldn't find an osprey on Cape Cod. When I was here in the 70s as a birder and a researcher, seeing an osprey was huge. So we passed laws to protect them. We put up poles. We saved them. We brought them back. Anybody disagree with that? Okay. Well, in 1985, you couldn't find a gray seal on Cape Cod. They weren't here. In fact, with some of you may remember my dear friend Dave Murdoch. Me and Dave Murdoch went out on a January day with a museum group to look at seals, January 18th, 1991 to be precise, and there was on the north end of North Monomoy a gray seal and a pup. And that was the first pup. There were 3 born that year. So what did we do? Oh, I know. We passed laws to protect them. I don't hear anybody heralding the return of the gray seal. But it's the exact same story as the osprey. They were gone. We saved them. Gray seals were gone. We saved them. And they're not going away. This is a harp seal, not a gray seal. Gray seals and harbor seals sit on the edge of the water, and they jump in the water as soon as you come by with your dog or on foot or with a boat. But this is a harp seal. This is an ice flow seal from the Gulf of St. Lawrence. In the winter, the 1-year-old harp seals travel south, and we often see them up on the beaches on the Outer Cape in January. There were very few this year, but in past years there have been huge numbers. And they are prey to eastern coyotes. And we found this seal one day on the tip of Nauset, North Beach, I guess you call it. And we scared 3 coyotes off this seal about a quarter mile ahead of it. We came down with the truck, saw the coyotes run off, said, what are they on? We looked, and here's this alive seal. Its head was pudding. And a group came down with a truck about an hour later, and we're going to save it. They're going to put it in the truck, take it back somewhere, and rescue it. It wasn't IFAL, and it wasn't Stephanie. It was some group, 15, 20 years ago. And I said, no, leave this seal here. And they said, oh, no, our mission is to save it. I said, well, we've seen 4 of these 1-year-old harp seals on our trip down Nauset so far. And you need to leave this here so the coyotes can come back and eat it. I'll go to the next picture. And they said, no, our job is to take it and save it. And I said, well, if you take this seal away from here, the coyotes, eastern coyotes, are just going to go kill another one. So why don't you leave this one here, let them come back and feed on it, and then the other 3 or 4 that we saw won't be preyed upon. And they said no. They took the seal. And I thought, if you're going to be in that business, you need to learn a little bit about biology and how animals live. So coyotes dig holes. They use old fox dens, typically. They enlarge an old fox burrow. Sometimes they'll nest under a boat. Sometimes they'll nest under... You put these plates down in your shower. You're gone all winter. It's a summer rental or a summer house, and you got this plate down in your shower stall. They'll dig under that. Anywhere that they can raise 4 or 5 pups, they'll call that a den. Males are bigger than females. let's talk about weight. Let's talk about all the people who have said to me, I stood toe-to-toe with a 70-pound coyote. Let's talk about all the people who say, here's one you'll love, it was as big as a German Shepherd. Okay, they're not as big as German Shepherds. In fact, they're not even half the size of a German Shepherd. I've weighed hundreds of dead coyotes. You don't put 15 gray squirrels on a split rail fence and see a 30-pounder. Okay? You don't line 10 chipmunks up on your front steps and see a 12-pound chipmunk. Every red-tailed hawk you look at is going to be 16 to 18 inches high and weigh half a pound. This is how nature works. You don't see red foxes as big as golden retrievers. Every red fox you see is the size of a red fox. And every coyote, Eastern coyote you see, is the size of an Eastern coyote. And I'm going to tell you straight up, every male coyote that you stop and pick up on the roadside, hook its legs on a weight and lift it up to weigh it, every male is going to weigh between 41 and 47 pounds. John Way, young fellow who got his PhD working with coyotes on the Cape, great scientist, radio collared a lot, he live trapped a female on Sandy Neck that was 52 pounds. That's big. I've never weighed an Eastern coyote male over 48 pounds. Never. Females, 29 to 36 pounds. That's it. Next time you see one, take it home, take it in your bathroom, put it on a scale. It's going to be consistent. Yes?
What if they mate with a much larger dog? Doesn't that animal then?
It depends on who mates with who. If your much larger dog mates with a male or female coyote, it's going to have pups, and you're going to know that it bred with a coyote. And that may be an exception to the rule. However, I've never experienced that, and I don't know anyone doing any research on Eastern coyotes that has ever had a half-breed like that they've been able to weigh or even study. The only introgression we're seeing with domestic dogs now is through tissue samples and DNA. But I don't know of anyone at all from here to Canada that has actually found or weighed or studied a live or dead coyote that is part dog. You know, your dog, in other words, if your dog breeds with a coyote, and it comes home and has puppies, you're going to look at those puppies and go, wow, these look like they're coyote. But it's still not going to be a huge animal. It's going to look like a domestic dog, basically. It's going to be a big golden retriever that has some coyote traits. But again, I've never heard of any instance where someone has definitively said, yeah, this is a dog-coyote mix and it's my pet. Never heard of it. That picture I showed you had a white-tipped tail, and I've never seen a coyote that doesn't have a black-tipped tail. That's the only reason, aside from the fluffy pelage around the head, that I believe that coyote may have had some dog DNA. So, but I mean, it's a good question. What if they breed with a bigger dog? But they're still probably not going to go out into the wild looking like a coyote. If they bred with, they're going to look like that animal. And that animal to me wasn't any larger than a male coyote. It was a typical coyote. So this is some of the tissue samples that I sent to Trent University, the Forensic and Genetics Lab in Ontario. Dr. Brad White, he did a lot of work with us on North Atlantic right whales when I was with the Center for Coastal Studies. So I said to him, would you be willing to look at some Eastern coyote DNA? And he said, sure, Peter. So he was kind enough to do that. These are some animals that basically say where I found them, when I found them. It dates back 20 years. to the early 2000s, bone, muscle, teeth, whatever part, Brewster, Dennis, Bourne, Harwich, Eastham, Truro. And these are the responses that I got. So 40% of these DNA samples came back as Eastern Wolf. These are all these are all Cape Cod coyotes. Cape Cod Eastern Coyotes. And the Eastern Coyote sequencing that came out as mitochondrial DNA was similar to Texas coyotes. So this is a small sample of what's on Cape Cod, but you can see several of them sequenced out as Eastern Wolf. Yes.
Do you ban them, or do you?
No, I have little notices at many of the dispatchers of the police stations on the Cape with my name and phone number, and when they find a roadkill or get a roadkill from the highway department, they call me, and I go and weigh it, take a tissue sample, send it to Trent.
But like with bears and whatnot, but where they put
John,
tags on their ears?
yes, Jonathan Way radio collared several,
Yeah.
and he studied those animals for years. His website, I think if you looked for Cape Cod coyote research, you'd probably find John Way's website, and you could learn a lot about the work he did with radio collared animals. He knew the animals very well. Yes?
Why do we have two different kinds here? Because I thought that the Western Coyote came and mated with the Eastern Wolf, and so the ones we had were typically that mix. But you're saying we also have Coyote.
Yes, because the eastward expansion of the Western Coyote was basically in three different waves: a northern wave, a central wave, and a southern wave. So apparently, many of the coyotes, Eastern Coyotes here on Cape Cod, that did not interbreed with Eastern Wolves are similar genetically to Texas.
All just kind of converge.
Yep, they're absolutely what they did. They all converged, yep. And that's why we have such a mishmash of what we call canid soup. Brad White said to me, he said, Peter, when people ask you about coyotes on Cape Cod, I saw this coyote, I saw that coyote, he said, you can just shrug and say, big coyote, small wolf, looking at it, you can't tell. Any of the coyotes that you look at on Cape Cod, you really cannot tell by looking at them if they are more wolf than coyote or more coyote than wolf.
To that point, do other East Coast areas have a similar mix of Eastern Wolf and Texas?
Yep,
stuff?
all the way through the mid-Atlantic states, all the way down to what now there's integration with what they call the red wolf, which is ostensibly an endangered species. But there are published papers now in the canid genetics that suggest that the red wolf has already been extirpated by integration with Eastern coyotes and Western wolves and timber wolves and even gray wolf, the big white wolves that we see in the high Arctic eating muskox and caribou. On their southern range, they interbred with Eastern wolves on their northern range. So basically, any coyote that you see today would likely have DNA from gray wolves, timber wolves, Western coyotes. It's really just a mishmash of canid genetics. And when you see them on the Cape, they basically are just unconcerned with you. They're path followers. That's why you see them in the road, going down the driveway, walking down the power lines, going down the middle of your street. They prefer to follow paths rather than to bushwhack. And if you see one, it's going to give you a look, and then it's casually going to walk away because it really has no concern for you at all. It's a wild animal. Wild animal. Yes?
So I live across from a wooded area, and in January, you hear what seems to be a lot of them in there. When it gets dark, you get these periods of howling.
Yip howls, they're called.
That are incredible.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the day, if
light up, right? Yeah.
It sets them off like crazy.
That's exciting.
Are they still there, or did they leave? Because we don't get it, you don't hear it anymore.
Oh, come back.
Oh no, oh no. Oh no, they're found in every environment on the Cape. I was mentioning to someone earlier, when you walk out your door and you hear the blue jays just making a racket,
Right.
or you hear the crows up in the tree making a racket, they're all just talking. And that's the same with the coyotes when they're talking. They're all just communicating, making a lot of noise. That's how they communicate. They make a lot of noise.
But what I'm saying is, that we heard it a lot in January, February.
Yeah.
Now we don't hear it anymore.
That's because they're breeding now, and they've got newborn pups, and they got, they're
So
trying to,
they haven't gone away, they're still in the
No.
woods across
Yeah.
the street from me, it's just that they aren't making the noise.
most likely,
The
because,
other thing we see is, now we see deer,
yeah,
and the deer are going into the woods across the street, and I always thought coyotes attacked deer, but apparently.
they don't really. In northern Maine, where there are eastern wolves, they attack deer. They go into the deer yards and kill deer. But around here, they would feed on a deer that was hit by a car or a deer that got away from a hunter. But these coyotes and their ability to kill a white-tailed deer, they really eat small mammals. That's what they eat. So they're not going to go and take down deer. Like I said, in Maine, where they're larger, there's more wolf involved. John Way is working really hard to get the Maine Division of Fisheries and Wildlife to protect eastern wolves in northern Maine. And they're just simply telling them, look, they're all coyotes. Because you can kill them, you can shoot them. Some states, in Massachusetts, there's a season, November to February. In a lot of states, you can kill coyotes whenever you want. And in Massachusetts, a lot of guys do. They're out deer hunting, a coyote walks by, they shoot it. You're supposed to check in coyotes, just like you check in deer. During hunting season for coyote, they're considered pelt animals. That fur on all those Air Force parkas, those green Air Force parkas, that's coyote fur. So coyotes are considered a pelt animal, so you can shoot them from November to February in Massachusetts. In other states, you can shoot them all year round because they're considered pests. So to answer your question, that's how coyotes communicate, is they make a lot of noise. They're just talking.
But they're still across the street from me.
Yeah, they're probably, I don't think there's anyone in this room that doesn't have coyotes nearby. Gosh, I've got these silly little blink cameras that I put on at night, to catch the raccoons and everything. The other morning, I checked the camera, and at 9:30, while we're sitting there watching TV, this eastern coyote comes right underneath the window of our family room, sniffs around the hose, and walks away. They're really everywhere. I mean, the carnage that goes on outside your bedroom window at night would really blow your mind. There's a lot going on. That's why they're called wild animals.
Do they migrate?
Nope.
Oh, well,
They live in family groups. They don't live in a pack. They live in a family group. So right now, they have pups. They're quiet. They're raising their babies. They don't want anyone to know where they are. In 3 months, in July and August, you'll see 4 or 5 or 6 coyotes. That's mom, dad, and the kids. And the young ones are spindly and skinny. Go ahead, finish.
where we are in 6-7 months in Florida, we used to see them frequently, even during daylight hours. I mean, 5 o'clock, you'd see one
Yeah.
on the golf course.
True.
You'd see them running down the golf course.
Yeah.
And over the past 2 or 3 years anyway, it seems like we haven't seen any. And I asked a bunch of guys, have you seen any coyotes? And we'd hear them at night often too. And the explanation I've heard from several people is, well, they ate out all the bunnies and squirrels and then moved on. They've migrated and they'll come back.
Yeah.
And
Well,
some haven't seen them.
bunnies and squirrels don't allow anyone to eat them all because they reproduce rapidly and in big numbers. I think they could have been controlled. They could have all been shot, but they don't migrate. They could have just left the area for some reason. I don't really know. I don't know what goes on in Florida.
That's true, they shoot everything in Florida.
Yeah. They could have just left the area, which is too bad, but
Do they tend to eat at certain times of the day, dawn and dusk? Or
They're crepuscular, which is dawn and dusk, typically, and at night. But I've seen them feeding all day, especially when there's pups, because female coyotes, all female wild animals during this time of year are, they're worn out. I mean, it's hard giving birth to a number and producing milk. You got to produce milk for the offspring. Same way with birds. Birds are going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Feeding their chicks every 10 minutes. It's a hard life when you've got 5 or 6 or 7 kids, all to raise, and rarely all of them survive. You think about a pair of birds nesting. All they need to do is raise 2 over their entire breeding lifetime to equal themselves.
And coyotes is typically 4, 5?
3 to 5.
3 to 5.
In Colorado, the sheep ranchers achieved an act of Congress to control coyotes using all means possible, even to the point of putting wire and treble hooks into dens to pull out the pups. They did it for 10 years. They spent millions of dollars, and they learned at the end of this 10-year period that the average litter size of the coyotes in Colorado went from 3 to 5 pups to 11 to 13 pups. That's a published paper. So, and all wild animals are like that. When you put pressure on breeding adult wild animals, they account for that pressure and do what they can to alleviate the pressure. Yes?
Peter, for
Mm.
years you'd hear the ruckus from the coyotes, and people say, oh, they must have made a kill.
Yeah.
But that's not true at all, right? They're
Yeah.
all just.
Typically, predators don't broadcast a kill.
I wouldn't think so. If you think about that.
Yeah, they're just talking. That's all they're doing is talk. Or they get excited when they hear the sirens, and they like to wail on the sirens. I mean, that's pretty typical. But when you hear coyotes yip howling, it's a racket. It lasts about 3 to 4, 5 minutes, and then it stops. And it's usually 2 or 3 or 4 coyotes. And people say, oh, there were 12 to 15 coyotes. I heard them. No, you'd be amazed what 3 or 4 coyotes can do vocally,
Oh, yeah.
way up in the back.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was gonna ask about, because you hear so much pack hysteria. So I'd love to be able to tell people that is literally a family of 3 or 4. Do they pack at all? Do you hear these stories?
It's rare that they
Running
do.
down dogs
The
and-
social structure is the family,
Yeah,
as opposed to Arctic wolves, where you have an alpha male, alpha female, and subordinates all the way down to the guy that's getting bit and picked on all the time. But coyotes, it's basically a family group. Now, that's not to say that on any given winter day out on the outer beach, 2 or 3 families or 2 families might get together and you see 7 to 10 coyotes. I've never seen any more than
right.
3 or 4 coyotes at a
I
time.
just hate the hysteria about it, so I'd love to be able to just.
Well, you don't have to hate the hysteria about it. You need to educate people about
That's
it.
what I'm trying to say. I'd like to.
Because they're, like I began this very program with the word misconception. And there are so many misconceptions about Eastern coyotes. And the reason is because they're dogs. And people are afraid of getting bitten by dogs. But coyotes don't bite people. They just can't necessarily be bothered with people. They'll stare you down. They'll follow a bicycle rider. A bicycle rider going down the bike path, turn around, there's a coyote trotting along behind him. Oh, there's a coyote following me. And then they turn around again and it's gone. Or they're very curious. They go through the yard, they stop, they look at you, and then they continue on. If you want a better look at them, you start squeaking, and they'll stay right there. But they won't approach you. They're like any other wild animal. I mean, I'd much rather be confronted by an Eastern coyote than a raccoon. Yes.
The squeaking, is that a sound another sound they make, or is
No,
that?
it's an injured small mammal.
It is. Well, I was thinking because fox have amazing, tiny little squeaky voices.
Yeah,
But not, so that's what it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, the fox is the fisher. Okay, fishers aren't talking. People always tell me, oh, the fisher, oh, I heard a fish, oh, they make some, no, they don't talk. It's the fox that sounds like the person being murdered
Yeah.
in the backyard. Screaming. Red foxes are really good at vocalizing, and they really make some screaming sounds.
They do,
At least you know the coyotes do the yip howl, and you can tell it's a group of coyotes all looking at the moon, having a great time. But foxes just start barking.
Is a fox a canine or a feline?
A fox is a canine,
It is a canine.
but it's very different classification than dogs and wolves and coyotes. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, couple of years ago, I think, there was quite a lot of talk about coy wolves. I mean, there
Yeah.
were seemingly some enormous, coyotes, but, I mean.
These
we
are all
saw
coy
them.
wolves.
They just seemed like they were bigger than we had seen.
No,
in
they're
the
not,
past,
though.
But they weren't.
I'm sorry, they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not. They're 45, 48 pounds, the males, females 36, 41. I'm telling you, I've weighed more than I could ever count, and I've never weighed a dead male coyote more than 48 pounds.
Are there
And I can't even remember that. It's probably 47.
So, do you observe actual wolves here in this area, or?
Well, it's like I said, you really
don't
need to
know.
just shrug and go,
Yeah.
is that a small eastern wolf?
But I mean, if you had, yeah, so, is that when it says eastern wolf, that could be a pure eastern wolf?
That means that the mother of that animal was an eastern wolf. This is mtDNA, mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is DNA based on the lineage of the mother. So when that jaw and skull that I found in a bog in Eastham was sequenced and came out as eastern wolf, the mother of that animal was an eastern wolf. Mitochondrial DNA is the female, the maternal lineage of the animal. And that's the easiest way to get these sequenced out without me paying a lot of money to do a full genetic rundown on the animal.
But doesn't that necessarily mean that there was an eastern wolf that was in this territory or close to it?
Could have been Maine, could have been Canada,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, somebody sent me a picture once from Chatham. I don't have it anymore because it was a Kodachrome slide. It was a long time ago, and it was a beautiful big red wolf. I mean, it was up against a split rail fence, and it was almost as high as the second rail, and it was a big coyote, but it was beautiful. It was red. I mean, you need to look at every coyote that you see. Instead of being afraid of it, look at it, observe it, watch what it's doing, and it's just living its life, being an eastern coyote. But they thrive on being around residential areas and neighborhoods. There's garbage, there's cats, there's mice, there's rats. You see them walking down Chatham Main Street and Provincetown Main Street and Wellfleet Main Street all the time because of rats. I mean, let's face it. It's kind of funny to say this, but the word rat has such a negative connotation. Who doesn't have rats? I mean, it's Cape Cod. There's rats everywhere on Cape Cod. Nobody in this room can shake their head and go, not on my house. Because there's rats everywhere. Norway rats, I mean, let's face it, they are the surviving mammal on the planet. And all the predators, the foxes, the coyotes, the cats, the owls, the hawks, they're all eating them. But they're reproducing rapidly. So, yes, in the back.
To follow up on his question about seeing the really large ones, and you're saying like the Eastham jaw, the mother was an eastern wolf.
Let me clarify. Somewhere,
Okay.
I should have made that more clear.
Okay.
Somewhere in that
the mother-
lineage.
in the maternal lineage, not.
I didn't mean to say that animal's mother. That came out wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But in that lineage, there was a female eastern wolf, probably a timber wolf. Yes.
Speaking about owls and wildlife eating other wildlife, I think about people who put poison out
Yeah.
to get rid of the rats, and then the owls come, and then the eagles come, and they're poisoned.
Yeah, rodenticide is the biggest issue now with birds of prey.
Horrible death.
Owls are dying, and great red-tailed hawks are dying all the time.
Awful, and then people think it's so simple, I'll just put poison out.
You go to Ace Hardware, you buy one of these little wooden square things with a piece of metal on it. You put some peanut butter and birdseed on it, put it out beside your house, and you're laying there at 11 o'clock just ready to fall asleep, and you hear, and you go, I got one. I can remember laying in bed in the summertime a few years ago when there were lots of rats around down the back in the woodpile, wherever, and I just remember laying in bed and just hearing them go.
One after another.
Yeah, got another one.
Then you could go to sleep.
Okay, enough of that. So they don't necessarily kill deer, but they will feed on dead deer or injured deer. They'll kill injured deer. It's hard for these eastern coyotes in our area in Massachusetts to kill a white-tailed deer. I was with my dog Gus, golden retriever, beautiful dog, and he loved to go out on my work with me in the woods. And one day we were at a bog, and we came upon a dead deer. And we could see that the coyotes had been feeding on it. The bones were gnawed. This reminds me of another story. And the bones were gnawed. And it was just interesting to see. There was fur all over the place. And Gus was sniffing around. He didn't eat any of it or anything. But the very next day, or within a couple of days, we were back over the bog. And I'm always throwing the ball for him. And, dogs remember. Because I threw the ball for Gus, and he came back with this. Hey, Dad, I found the rib cage of that deer we were looking at. So Gus goes in the woods and goes, yeah, I remember that deer carcass. I'll bring Dad back part of the deer carcass. So he comes running up to me. I don't know what happened to the tennis ball, but he brought me back a rib cage of a white-tailed deer.
Good boy.
And I said, good boy, Gus. Anyway. So now here's a nice, healthy eastern coyote. This was in Provincetown on Shank-Painter Road. And you can see that this one turned around because I was in my truck. He was walking down this road. I started squeaking, and he turned right around to look at me and go, what is that? His tongue hanging out, just like a dog. The Dennis dog officer called me up and said, there have been a lot of coyotes nearby, and this woman is missing her standard poodle. And she's afraid, this is a true story. This really happened. And she's afraid that her standard poodle has been killed by coyotes. And the dog was gone for about 2 days. And when the dog was finally found, it was in a bog with eastern coyotes feeding on a deer carcass. Coyote, standard poodle. All just described to me by the dog officer in Dennis. So the dog had been out, and my dog Gus, gosh, if I had my video camera, my dog Gus and Sonny, my chocolate, they got out of my truck one day at this same bog and took off. And I knew immediately that there were coyotes because they just don't get out of the truck and bolt. And we came around the corner, and there was 2 coyotes. The female took off, and my chocolate lab Sonny just bolted into the woods after it, and I didn't see him for 20 minutes. Gus and this male coyote, they ran around playing. They were doing the tail wag and the feet out, and every time Gus would get near this coyote, the coyote would speed up. And anytime Gus would get tired, the coyote would slow down and look over his shoulder, say, come on. And eventually, Gus got tired, and the coyote just walked away, and Sonny came from the other side of the bog, running across the bog. So he must have chased that female coyote a quarter mile all the way around the bog through the woods. Of course, he never caught it because no dog is ever going to catch a coyote. They're so fast. This is your typical coyote in the street. Squeak, look at me, take a picture. And this is how a lot of people, before today that is, felt like they wanted to see a view of a coyote walking away. So I figure that's a perfect photograph to finish with. And I hope that I have alleviated some misconceptions. I can assure you that you don't need to be afraid of eastern coyotes any more than you need to be afraid of any other wild animal, bird, mammal, snapping turtle, water snake. They're here. They're not going anywhere. They're part of our neighborhoods. They're part of our environment. They're a true dog. They will play with a big dog. They will run away from a small dog because we know small dogs want to bite them. It's what small dogs do. And when you see one, you might take a second look at it. If you have any discussion or argument about anything that I've mentioned today, I'd be more than happy to talk about it with you. Yes?
I just got a question. There was that video of the woman that was menaced by a coyote on Wellfleet on one of the beaches.
Oh yeah, I mean, a little kid in Race Point got bit on the foot by an eastern
So,
coyote.
I mean, it's not that they're not gonna be interested in you.
Well, I think that there was food involved.
Exactly, yeah,
Where if there's food involved, it's a different story.
yeah.
The little kid in Wellfleet got nipped. I watched a video on the national news. I'm not saying pet coyotes. I'm saying don't trust them. I mean, they're wild animals. Wild animals are wild animals. There was a video on the national news of a guy in California. Took his little girl out of the car, put her down,
Yeah, yeah.
went around the other side of the car, and a coyote came and grabbed her by her pant leg and dragged her across the lawn.
Yeah.
So who knows what they're up to? I posted a video the other day on my Facebook page of a coyote in someone's backyard playing with their dog toys, flipping them up in the air and running around and playing with the ball and the rawhide bone, flipping it. So they're true dogs. And like I said, if you look at the statistics, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm defending them, but if you look at the statistics, there's over 1 million people a year in this country that go to the hospital because they've been attacked by a vicious, beloved pet. But there's nobody that goes to the hospital that's been attacked by a coyote. I think there's 12 records in Massachusetts of people being bitten by eastern coyotes, and there were over 1 million last year in the country of domestic dog bite. Pit bulls kill children, for God's sakes. So how can you be afraid of an eastern coyote when pit bulls are killing kids? Again, I'm just trying to get things, on a level plane here. People have misconceptions about eastern coyotes. They're just another wild animal. They're shaped like dogs, though. That's
Do
the
they ever
problem.
fight foxes?
Say again?
Do they ever fight foxes? And what would win, a fox or a coyote?
Oh, coyotes don't tolerate foxes. They kill them.
They kill them. So a coyote would kill a fox.
There's a
It
big
could catch
study.
a fox?
Yeah, big study was done in University of Vermont. It's published in the journals of a kid doing his doctorate or his master's did a big study on fox territories and eastern coyote territories, and the coyotes killed the foxes on any instance they could. Yeah, they don't tolerate them. Red fox, that is. Yes.
I don't wanna be, I'm so sorry I was late, I was just busy reading.
Yeah. I mean, come on, for heaven's sake, it started.
In case I missed something,
You did.
missed this and you're repeating it, what is the current population swing? Are we up, we down? I mean, I was looking.
Yeah, that's an inconsequential question because
Okay.
I don't think there is a population number on Cape Cod of how many coyotes there are because it doesn't really matter. There's nowhere on Cape Cod that you couldn't find a coyote. There's no neighborhood or town on coyote where they're not breeding. There's probably 2 to 3 breeding pair in every town. Their home range is about 11 square miles, so you can.
I work in a place where everybody comes in and goes, oh, there's more bunnies than usual because the coyotes have been killed. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of some of the truths about it, I mean, I know that's not true.
Yes, that's what we've been doing.
Bunnies are down, it's all about the coyotes.
If you wanted to know how many coyotes there are on Cape Cod, you could call the Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife in Westboro, and they would probably give you a number. But to me, the number.
No, if there was a trend, it was where I went down, that's all.
No, red foxes. There's a trend based under the influence of sarcoptic mange. Red foxes have about a 6 to 8 year cycle on the Cape, based on sarcoptic mange, where they all get mange and their faces are swollen and there's no hair on their tails and they all die of this skin parasite. but coyotes are not as susceptible to sarcoptic mange as red foxes are. We've seen it, but really not very common at all.
How long do they live for, and what eventually kills coyotes?
They live about as long as your average dog, 6 to 10 years, and cars usually kill them. Or hunters. There's a lot of hunters out there that shoot every coyote they see.
And can they be rabid?
They're not one of the animals in Massachusetts that is known to carry rabies. Bats, raccoons, and skunks carry rabies flat out. You don't want to go near a skunk, you don't want to go near a raccoon, you don't want to get bit by a bat. They are all susceptible to rabies, and rabies will kill you. Fella in Marston's Mills was cleaning his gutters, got bit by a bat, died of rabies. So coyotes don't generally carry rabies. I mean, it's very, very rare. I've never heard of it. And they rarely get sarcoptic mange, but they do. Dr. Donner, I think, whoever the fellow was over there in Harwich, he showed me some coyotes with sarcoptic mange many years ago, but they don't usually get the mange. The foxes do because of their small dens.
Well, on that happy note about the bat.
Yeah.
Peter, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. I hope I answered most of your questions, and I hope that I answered some misconceptions. And everything I said was based on my personal experience and expert experience. So I don't say what I think is true. I say what I know is true. So I hope you all learned something.
Peter's going to be out here. He has some books. If anybody's interested, he'll sign some copies for you. Thank you for coming. Please come back and visit the museum and join us for some of our other lectures.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.